Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. It's Mindy with Mindy Egan Design, and I'm going to be sharing with you how I created this card using the September 2018 release from Pretty Pink Posh. I am using the stamp set Anemones. This is a gorgeous stamp set. It has lots of floral images and leaves on here to be coloring up. So what I did is I stamped out the big floral image and the smaller one and a couple leaves onto some Nina Solar White cardstock. This is 80 pound. This is my personal preference as far as coloring goes, so you can use whatever you prefer or what you're comfortable coloring on. I did stamp this in a Copic friendly ink, and I will have that and all of my other supplies listed in the description area of the video and also on my blog, so you can reference that at any time. So what I'm starting out with here is R27. I am the type of colorer that likes to just jump right in with my darkest color. So I'm starting from the middle, working my way out towards the outer edge of the flower with that darkest color, and also going around where some of the petals would be overlapping. Because when they overlap, they're going to cast a shadow. I'm not going to be real concerned about it, but I did want to have some depth and dimension in there. Then I come in with the R22, which is my mid-tone, and work on blending that darkest color out. And you can see I like to work in sections. That's just, like I said, how I've kind of gotten used to coloring. I'm comfortable with it. I'm quick at it. Even though I sped the video up, I do color pretty fast. And one of the big reasons for that is I don't like to focus too much on the details. That's just not how I color. I do enjoy coloring. I do enjoy the process, but I'm not one where I want to spend 5 hours coloring something. So as long as I have, and I think that's kind of also why I like to have such a dark color for my depth and dimension. That way, that really gives that separation of color. It really gives that dimension to the flower, and I didn't have to spend 5 hours doing it. And if that's something you prefer, that's totally okay. There are some amazing artists out there that do fabulous, fabulous work. This is just my personal preference, what fits into my schedule for when I have time to craft. And I just wanted to throw that out there. So, if you are worried about how long it takes to color, things like that, grabbing a darker marker to really add that dimension can really help. And it doesn't always have to be blended out perfectly. You can get a lot of dimension without doing a lot of blending. A lot of times what I do, as I've said before in some of my videos, is I go through with my 3 markers is usually what I use for my color combinations. And I do one coat and then I go back through and add another. And that just really helps me get what I'm looking for when it comes to the look of the flower. So you can see here I'm adding some more of that R27, adding a little bit more of that depth. And a lot of times too, you'll see some flowers, people like to do flicks for more separation. I'm more of a blender. If you've noticed in any of my coloring before, I like to blend them out. I flick sometimes when it comes to hair on people, but when it comes to the flowers, I'll blend a little more than I normally would, I think. So just a little information, I guess, on my experience with coloring and what I prefer. Maybe it gives you a new way to look at Copic coloring. Like I said, it's all just personal preference, also what you have time for. I have a busy schedule with kids and I do love to craft. So this was just how I kind of tweaked my coloring experience to fit into my schedule. And so you can see here I'm just going through that flower and blending out again with that mid-tone, the R22, and then the lightest color I have is the R20. And I'm just going around those edges and bringing that in just a little bit to that mid-tone. This was quite a lighter combination of colors than what I typically would color with, but I really liked how soft those colors turned out. And then I had gone back through with the R27, blending out with that R22, and then coming back in with the R20. and that'll complete that large cluster of flowers. And then I can work on the smaller one. And I did the same thing on the smaller flower. I'll be going through with the darkest color first, the R27, adding in shadows to where the petals are overlapping and towards the bottom of the petal. And then blending out with the R22. And then the lightest color, which is the R20. And this one I knew would be tucked behind quite a bit, so I'm not as concerned with how well it blended. I just needed some color in there. Now for the leaves, I'm using YG21 as the lightest color. YG13 is the mid-tone and YG17 is the darkest. And on the leaves, I did start out with that YG21 as kind of a base because it's a really bright color. And then I came in with the darkest, which is the YG17, and just added some darker areas here and there. I really didn't think about where a shadow would be. I just needed to have that contrast. And then that YG21, like I said, really pops off the page with that YG17. So this is kind of a fun, bright green combination. And then I'll do that with the larger leaf as well. The YG17, blend out with that YG13. And I do go over the YG17 a little bit to kind of soften it, and then lighten it up again with the YG21. For the centers, I'm using E55, E57, and E59. Then I'll use the coordinating dies that also can come with this set that you can purchase separately. And I just hold those in place with the Post-it note tape to run through my die cut machine. This Post-it tape is really great because it secures my die in place but does not rip my paper. So just line those up with the edge, and this will just give a really nice clean cut all the way around those images. And now these are all die cut, so I can just remove, and you can see I'm just taking these off fairly quick. And that Post-it tape held great, and my images are perfect. I have not had this Post-it tape rip any of my images ever, and I've been using it for quite a while. So, and also the roll that I get lasts a long, long time. So for the background, for my floral images, I'm going to be using Worn Lipstick and Wild Honey Distress Oxide. I'll be using the Bristol Smooth paper. This is a great paper for blending, whether it's the Oxides or the Distress inks. So that is why I like using this. And then I just take the Worn Lipstick. I'm starting on one end and applying that color in a type of circular motion. And I'll grab a Post-it note here real quick to protect my fingertips and my paper from getting any fingerprints on it. So I can hold my paper down in place. And then I can use the Wild Honey and start at the other end, kind of getting lighter as I get towards that middle. And then I can come back in and blend these two together to have a nice smooth transition. I thought these colors would work really well with my floral images, with my greenery, with that bright green. It's really going to pop off of this background. And then you can see it just softens up really nice into kind of a light orange. And just some really nice, bright, fun colors. Then I'm going to take my spritzer bottle, and I'll just spritz some water on here real quick. Let that sit for a second or two. And then I'll grab a paper towel and lay that over the top, and it's going to leave these splatter marks all over just to kind of break up that background a little bit, since the oxides do react with water really well. Now I'm actually going to be stamping onto this background with these stamps. I have actually never used the Oxides to stamp before, so this was something really new to me, but something I wanted to try, and it worked out really well. So I just made sure that my stamp image was nice and clean, lined my cardstock up in my MISTI so that I can have some of these floral images hanging off the side. That way it didn't look too planned out, looked kind of scattered. And I'm using the Worn Lipstick on top of the worn lipstick blended background. Now, if I were to go back and do this again, I probably would have picked just a slightly darker shade. You can't see it on the screen here, but I may have picked a darker one if I were to do it again, just to make it stand out a little bit more. But it is a really nice soft background where it's not going to take away from my focal point. And so I'll clean that stamp off, and I'm going to do the same thing with the Wild Honey. I'm trying to keep the pink on the pink and the yellows together. I'm just making sure to clean off the stamp really well in between my stamping. And I'll just adjust my paper in my MISTI so I can have this large floral image hanging off the bottom of the card. And the Wild Honey actually worked out really well. You could see here that Wild Honey really did kind of show up better than the pink, I think. And then now I have a white A2 size card base that I'll be using. I trimmed my ink blended panel down to 4 by 5.25. And this is just me laying out where I want my images to go. I like to do this a lot to give me an idea how it's going to sit. A nice trick to use is take a picture. If you liked how that arrangement was, that way you can reference back to it. And then I'm going to be stamping this many thanks on there. I love to make thank you cards for teachers, friends, things like that. And this sentiment is actually off of the Hummingbird Thanks stamp set. And I love this font. It's just a gorgeous font. So I lined my paper up into my MISTI about where I would have room for that sentiment. And I'm actually going to use some VersaFine black onyx ink to stamp onto this background. And you just want to be careful and give this time to dry before you mess with that panel, so that way you don't smear that ink, because it does stay wet a little bit longer than most. So once that sentiment is dry, I'm just going to go ahead and attach that ink blended panel to my white card base. And then I can start arranging my items again where I'm going to have them go on here. I wanted that flower bud to be popping out of the top, and then just arranging the leaves around the side, making sure to kind of form it around the sentiment at the bottom, kind of framing it. And I do want to have my big floral image popped up with foam squares. So what I'll do is I'll just take some tweezers and some liquid glue, and I'm going to start putting those leaves down behind it. And these I'm going to attach just right to the card. I'm not going to pop these up. I didn't want to have a lot of dimension to the card. I just wanted that floral centerpiece to stand out a little bit more than the rest. And then I can come in and add my foam squares. You can use foam tape, or you could attach it just straight to the card if you prefer. So I'm just I did use a lot of foam squares there. I'm just making sure I had a nice solid coverage over that entire piece, since it is quite large. And then trying to figure out how I had that again, where it fit really nice. Kind of the downfall of using your phone to do videos is I couldn't take a picture of it to remind myself. So now I'm using some of these gorgeous Marigold Jewels. This is part of the September 2018 release from Pretty Pink Posh, and these are so pretty, and I thought they matched really well with this background. So I'm just scattering them around my floral image in the middle and around the sentiment. I'll use the jewel picker to pick these up. And you know, if you're a jewel picker, if you have one of these, I think they work really great. I love mine. I just clean it off with a baby wipe if it starts to get not too sticky, or even my stamp chamois when it's wet, and then let it sit for a minute, and it'll get re-tacky, if that's a word, but it helps. So then I will just use my liquid glue. I'm going to put a dot of glue down, pick up my jewel, and just kind of lightly roll my jewel picker off of the jewel. And then I'll go down and kind of push them down a little bit, make sure they're nice and secure. And that will finish off my card for the Anemones. So I really hope you enjoyed this card. I also have a few more to show you that I had created with the release, the September release from Pretty Pink Posh. I'll have all of these and more pictures on my blog as well too, so you can always reference back there. This card is using the Autumn Wreath, and I did die cut that wreath quite a few times to create dimension, and it turned out really, really pretty. And then I also have a card where I used the Pumpkin Patch Critters, and I just did a really quick ink blended background and die cut that sentiment from some gold glitter cardstock. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video and inspiration. If you did, I would really appreciate a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I'll catch you in the next video.